What if I told you that you can automate finding hundreds of fresh content ideas? This one automation saves me 10 hours of content research every week. Here's how I do it. First, we'll find RSS feeds from creators in our niche. Then we'll add those RSS feeds to an Airtable database. Then we'll use our make automation to grab those feeds and enter them into the news table in our database. Then we'll use this table summary to quickly glance at the articles that we just got so that we can see if there's anything that inspires us to create more content. It's very fast. I'll show you how to make it. First, we'll go to rss.feedspot.com and we'll search for my niche, which is health, and I'll go to 100 health blogs. Then I'll click the links on the blogs and I will look for RSS feeds in their source code. I happen to know that this one doesn't have one, so I'll show you what it looks like when it does work. We'll go to Chris Kesser and I'll click on his website. Then I'll right click in my browser and I will go to view page source, and then I will control F and look for feed. And I found feeds.feedburner.com/Chris Kesser. So when I click that, I get an XML file, and that is how we know we're in the right place. So I'll take the URL in my browser and I will put it in a new entry in my feed table, and that entry will look like this. So there'll be an ID field and then a process checkbox, the name of the website, the feed that we just pasted in. I've created a drop down of different categories and I assign it the health category. It has a status of active. The other status that I have in here is for inactive or bad. This is when I pull a feed, then it turns out the content is incorrect in some way, not useful to me. So then I mark it as bad. That way, in the future, if I stumble across it again, I'll have a note to myself that I don't want to use that same URL again. Then this will be blank, but when we run our automation, last run will show us the timestamp. And then these fields are going to link us to the news table so that we can easily see the articles at a glance. And so after we pull all of our articles, we can say, oh yeah, I want to do an article about collagen. I want to talk about how it helps the skin. Let's read that article and get some inspiration. When we pull the articles over, we get a number of fields. We get the URL of the article from the RSS feed, the title, the description, the author, the summary, the categories, and then these fields over here on the right are going to have possibly an image, and this is for our reference later. I'll show you what's going on there. So to make the feed table, let's do a run. So I have some more feeds already set up. Here, let's do this everyday health, and we'll do very well mind. They're both active, and let's just set this up the way that I would normally have it. So we'll get rid of status. So this is what it'll look like when you run it. So in the next iteration, we'll have a button here that just makes it go. But right now, we're going to go into our feed, our make automation, and we'll click go, and it's finding articles and it's storing them in our database. Let's go look at that. So here's a bunch of articles as well as the images that were sent over with the RSS feed, and here are the categories, so I can quickly look at those. And of course I have the URL, so if I use this data or this article in my content, I have all the information I need to link back to the inspiring article. So the first thing we have to do is make our feed table. So I'll unhide all of the fields. Our first field is a feed ID, and it is a formula, and it uses the record ID function. This will allow us to easily link to the news table and back. The process is a checkbox so that our automation reads the checkbox. If it's checked, then it'll process that feed. This is a website is a single line text. The RSS URL where the XML file is a URL. The category is a multiple select. I have it as a single select, and it has these different categories as options. Status is a multiple select. Probably should be a single select, and it has active and bad as the options. Then last run is a date in which we clicked include time, and the rest of these fields we can't set up yet. Now let's go to our new table called news, and let's show all of our fields. So our first field is news ID, and it's a formula with a record ID. Our second field is something that I'm calling IDN, which is ID and then N for number. It's an auto number field, and this just helps me see the articles in the order that they were put into the spreadsheet. And then the URL, this is all coming from the automation. The automation builds this entire table. Then the URL of the articles that it gave us from the XML, the date of the article. Oh, I didn't give you the URL is a URL field. The date is a date field. Title is a long text. It could be a single text. Description is a long text. Summary is a long text. Comments, single line text. Categories, long text. Pub date is a long text because I was having issues getting dates to work, so it's not set up as a date, but it still looks good. And the rest of this we will set up now. So to link the two tables together, we're going to create a link and then some lookup fields. So you're going to create a new column and it's going to be called news. It's a link. Let me show you what it looks like when you create it. Link to another record. And you're going to allow linking to multiple records. When you make that, you'll also get this news ID from news. It'll create this field automatically for you. And then you can look up any field in the news table and it'll show up here in the feed table. So the way that this works is this is a lookup field and it's looking up in the news table the title. So every title that is associated with this XML now displays as a list in the titles box. So I can see every single article that is in this table very easily without getting overwhelmed with all the data. And then over in the news table, we'll link back to the feed table. We'll create a lookup field. We'll call it website. The lookup source is feed. That's the table. And then the field we want is website. And so when we're in our feed looking at, when we are looking at our news, we want to know which blog these are from. We have a nice automatic populated field that says this is from the Chris Kessler blog, this is from Very Well Mind, so that it's very easy to see which records on the feed table these belong to. So that's it for Airtable. And then for the make automation, first node or module is search records in Airtable. And you'll create a connection to your Airtable account by clicking add and following the prompts. And then you'll select all of the data up to, probably don't need last run, but up to status. And the important part here is process equals all caps true, paren. And you actually only you can get as many as 10 records at a time using this limit of 10. And the actual total number of articles that you'll get back is 10 times the number of articles per feed. So if we have 10 feeds that are set to process and each one brings us 15, one run will bring us 150 articles. So this is the RSS retrieve items, and this is going to take the RSS feed URL that we placed in our feed table. So these are the feeds that we found using feedpot. It'll take this URL and it will say, go get me 15 articles from that XML. And then we're going to put an aggregator on that. And that way we're going to grab all of the articles in one array that we're going to iterate over. And so we'll grab the fields from the table where the source module is the RSS feed items. And then we'll say in an iterator, and we'll say, so iterator and aggregator. Aggregator is the one with the lines pointing to the left. Iterator is the one with the lines pointing to the right. The array aggregator says, put that entire set of bundles of articles into an array. And the iterator says, now let's loop over that array. So the iterator accepts the array from the aggregator. And that array is full of articles from the XML that the RSS module got for us. Then we'll run an Airtable search, which will look at the news articles that we've retrieved, and it will check to see if we already have a URL that is the string that came back from the feed. So this is verywellmind.com, why are we? And if we go to our news, we say, why are we? We don't have that one, so it'll get inserted. But if we did have it, this filter would stop us from going any further. So what it says is if that Airtable search came back with at least one ID, then I know that I already have that record. And I'm saying only continue if the ID does not exist. So if the record does not exist, we'll proceed. Then we're going to create a little trick to get the image to show up. If there is an image in the feed, this will be a trick in order to get that image to show up. So the image is of type attachment. And the code that we're going to trick Airtable into accepting the image is to put curly brace, URL, and then the enclosures URL. It's coming out of the RSS feed. So the enclosures are what the RSS feed is calling the media attachment. So sometimes this will be an image, sometimes it'll be a recording, it'll be a video, the type will be here, and I'm attaching it regardless of the type. And you put that in a JSON parser. And then you put an array aggregator after it, and you grab that field that you just created, so URL, right, and URL. So it's grabbing the URL from the JSON. That's going to allow us to add this array, which contains the JSON URL object and the value of the image URL. So let's see what it takes to fill in all of the fields in our news table. We're going to do a create record, and we're going to do the news table, and then each of these items is coming from the iterator for each feed item. So title, for example, here's title, why are we so afraid of aging? Sometimes some of these come across with HTML in them, so I use the strip HTML function to store non-HTML in our Airtable. The description comes over from RSS fields as well. The summary is up here above RSS. The categories is actually an array. So what we want to do here, when you're putting an array in a field, you're going to take all the items and flatten them. And you do that by using a join. So the categories is an array. So there's 1, 2, 3 items in it. And you need to put a separator between them. So say the 3 categories were health, diet, and exercise. So you can see here with the 1 in front of the self-improvement, that's our first item in the array. This screen is only showing us the first item, but there could be more. So rather than pulling each individual item over, we're going to flatten the array, and we're going to say join the items in the array and put a vertical bar between them. And that will give us a nice, easy to read set of categories in one field. And then the enclosure URL is the same URL that we made an attachment out of in our array down here. It's just the actual URL without trying to turn it into an image. This feed ID is the link between the news table and the feed table. So number 2 ID is all the way back here. This is the feed table, and it's the ID from this record. The feed ID is going back to the very first module, and it's grabbing the record ID of the feed that had the checkbox in process. So that's this feed ID right here. So that when we create our news article, we'll put that news ID in this feed field, and that is what is allowing us to say that, for example, this website is actually coming from the feed table because the fields are linked, because the tables are linked. The reason that I can see all the titles is because this feed ID is associated with all of the items. There's 15 items. It's associated with each of these. So that means I can drag the titles back over to this table, and it's grabbing those 15 titles. The reason that this works on multiple rows is because the feed search runs for as many times as it found a checkbox. So if there are 4 rows that are processed here, then the first row will come through and we'll get all the articles. Then the next row will come through, we'll get all the articles, etc. 3 and 4. So each time the row that has the checkbox is the row that has the feed ID that we want to link to. That feed ID is the parent to the news item, and the news items are all the children of that feed parent. It's so cool the way that this works. I'm just going to show you. Let's add another field, and let's make it a lookup field. And let's look up, we're in the news table, and let's look up the enclosure, which is the image, and create a field. And now we just created a gallery of all of the images to all of the articles. Then the last thing in this iterator is to close the iterator with an aggregator. We're not actually aggregating anything, but what we're doing is we're stopping from going any further to the right with our logic, because we want all of the items processed. So it'll run through 30 articles, 30, see all these, it ran through 30 different articles, two rows, 15 articles each, 30 articles. And then when it's done with both loops, it will do this last thing for that feed, which is to turn the process, field off. So when we're asking for a checkbox here, what we're doing is we're saying, see that process says no? We're saying uncheck that box. Instead, we're going to put a date over here that tells us we just ran. As a convenience, we don't want to have to uncheck the box. So we're having the automation do it for us. That is also grabbing the ID of the very first field. It is a first module. It's the record that has the ID for the processing field. And then we put a date in that field. We say format the date, and we grab the now field, which is right here in the date area, put a semicolon, and then we put in this little formula that says month, day, year, hour, second. And that's how we got the timestamps. When this processed turns off that checkbox, the first Airtable will go to its second record, and we'll do the whole thing again. So we just did that one. Then we're going to do this one, and we'll grab this RSS URL. We'll put it in the RSS reader. We'll aggregate the results. We'll iterate over every item, see if we already have it. If we don't have it, we'll create an image out of the URL for the image. We'll insert the RSS in the news table. And then finally, when we're all done with all of those articles, we'll turn off the checkbox and add a date. We already have done the first couple of items. Let's leave these 3 checked and let's go get 45 items. So I'm going to click run and then let's watch the magic. So we're getting 45 articles about diet, nutrition, supplements, exercise, magnesium, fish oil, vitamin D, Ozempic, cholesterol. And this is how you don't run out of ideas, because I run a blog about wellness. I care about supplements. I have never written a ginkgo biloba article. Maybe I'll go run my blog automation and go gather some research on ginkgo biloba and then create some social media content and post it using my automation and my Blotato account. And that is how you create an automation in Make using Airtable that creates thousands of ideas so that you'll never run out of content ideas.